The honourable member for Sackville-Cobequid.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and it's a pleasure to have a few minutes to stand on address in reply to the budget. Over the last week or so, we've been hearing in our caucus, and I've been hearing from many Nova Scotians, and of course, over the last week or so, many of those are Nova Scotians who work within the film and television and creative industry. And so I'd like to start my comments just on an overview of the budget, its impact, and what I feel and we feel is really a budget that goes after what's really behind the Ivany report, and that's to grow our province, to turn things around, to improve the conditions so that we retain our young people here, that we attract new people to come to our province, and that we can grow the economy so that we can move forward and we can address some of the issues that we know are there with the finances of the province. We have said that this, in our view, is an anti-youth, anti-rural Nova Scotia budget, and I'll give some reasons why, Mr. Speaker. The young people we need to have stay here, Mr. Speaker, many of them go to university. They go to community colleges. They go to the colleges and the educational institutions that we have in our province. Last year, for example, Mr. Speaker, the government decided to eliminate a $50 million program, the Graduate Retention Rebate Program, that went towards recently graduated students. In this budget, Mr. Speaker, so we see that as an attack on young people, that why are they going to stay if they can't gain access to that? Some of them feel used from the government because they utilized some of their arguments that they'd rather see those funds somewhere else. They weren't fully supportive of the graduate retention rebate, and I can understand that. If you're a student, I mean, you're worried about what's happening in your life that day, the tuition you're paying that month or that year. The graduate retention rebate was for those students who had graduated. So they felt somewhat used because their pitch to government was not to just eliminate that $50 million program and don't reinvest it. They wanted that $50 million reinvested in grants, reinvested in lowering tuition. There was some effort, I'll give credit to the government, to put some of that money back in. By no means did they put back and reinvest $50 million. And in this budget, Mr. Speaker, we see it again. The sights of the government is on our young people, the young people who are in university. We're going to have, and the universities are going to have, the government's allowing them to lift the cap of tuition, and it will be next year, to allow universities to adjust for market value, I think is what I heard at one point, but adjust their tuition, and they are allowed to increase it to whatever they want. It'll be up to the universities in our province, Mr. Speaker, and the students are concerned about that. And we turn ourselves and look at some of the investment or some of the lack of investment that I'll call that we need to do in this province to sustain services that we have, but to create that environment that the Ivany report so strongly advocated for. As former Minister of Health, I know it's a challenge to bring forward a budget. At the time I was there, it was just shy of $4 billion. I think it was $3.9 billion. I think this year it's 4.1 or 4.3 billion dollars. We've seen an increase. Well, I wouldn't call it an increase. It's really a freeze. Increase in the budget by 0.8%. It's really a freeze, and that's going to be a challenge for the government, for this new health authority that's overseeing delivery of health care, to maintain the services. There's going to be cuts. There's no question. I was there. If you have a freeze in the budget, there's going to be a cuts coming in health care, and Nova Scotians are going to feel the pain. And we're already seeing that. We're seeing it in rural Nova Scotia, Mr. Speaker. Rural Nova Scotia really is affected, I think, the first when it comes to health care delivery, when we see a reduction in funding or a freeze in funding. And we're seeing an increase in emergency room closures. First time in 5 years under the Liberal government now, we're seeing an increase in emergency room closures. We're seeing an increase in vacancies for nurses in our province. We're seeing the need for the government to hire nurses to fly in here and work, to maintain the service which we have, Mr. Speaker. We see wait times for home care increasing by 80% in just 6 months under the government, under the Liberal government. We see long-term care wait lists at a record high, and now a moratorium put on to any new long-term care placements and creation of new long-term care beds, Mr. Speaker. So we're going to feel that as the months tick by here, Mr. Speaker, and it'll be our role and our job to make sure that we are a voice for those people who feel that they have been affected by what is in this budget. The Yavne Commission stated quite clearly we needed to increase the economy and the chances for our economy and young people, and for that matter anybody, to create business here in our province. They contribute the taxes that are needed to ensure that these services are provided. We've heard over the last week or so government members trying to rationalize why the government went after the film tax credit. And I heard one thing, Mr. Speaker, that really I thought at the time was, I can't believe they're using that argument. And it was around the fact that, well, what would you rather have? You know, tax credit for film and television production or services for autism, for children with autism. And I thought, my Lord, Mr. Speaker, they have it all wrong. They don't understand it. The film tax credit here in this province contributes is worth over almost $140 million annually, Mr. Speaker. That's where the money comes from to support autism programs, to support home care, to support long-term care, to support our seniors, Mr. Speaker. That's where these funds are generated. And to hear that argument, I can't believe I've heard that. The interesting thing is, Mr. Speaker, with the gutting of the film tax credit, we seen just the other day how many people it'll affect. And even for myself, I knew the numbers were high. You know, over 2,000, almost 3,000 direct jobs. But I heard an interview from an individual who owns a company who shined some light on, it's not just those 2,000, 3,000 jobs, people who directly are involved in production of a film or a movie or a television show, Mr. Speaker. It's all those other individuals who support that industry, from the food truck that feed the people on set. But the other day I heard this interview, and it was from a lady who owns a company that provides extras for movies and televisions and commercials. And in her company alone, she has over 13,000 Nova Scotians who she calls on to work in the film industry as extras. Now, it's not their main job, but they subsidize their income through this. And I don't believe that the numbers that we've been given reflect that. 13,000 people that she has that she can contact to provide support and have additional employment here in the province. I ran into a gentleman who's a minister of a church. I went up to him. He had the collar on, Mr. Speaker, thinking maybe he's in character, but he wasn't. He runs a congregation I think he said in Lance, and his congregation benefited from the film industry, Mr. Speaker, and he himself works as an extra. He says, I don't have to, but he likes to, and it's part of who he is, and it contributes to our economy here in the province, Mr. Speaker. He pays taxes on that when he does work. So to try to condense the impact, I think, and minimize it, which I think what the government is doing on the impact of this industry in the province is just wrong. And I too, as the member who just spoke, I really hope that the attempts today are genuine, that they will listen to the industry to come up with a solution so that they don't gut the film tax credit, Mr. Speaker, because we see, and I know that we'll feel that impact, just like I mentioned, we will in the months ahead in healthcare. We'll feel the impact, and rural communities will feel the impact. Mr. Speaker, what's my time? Okay, I got a few more minutes. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I just want to go back to one thing. Of course, we were in government a number of years ago, Mr. Speaker, and I had the honor to be the first minister of a new department of Communities, Culture and Heritage. And we worked extremely hard as a new department to show Nova Scotians and show those who work within the arts and culture and heritage sector here in our province that government was serious about supporting them. We were serious about investing in them. And I had the honor to table a piece of legislation, Bill 1, which was in the fourth session of the 61st General Assembly. It was on March 30th, 2012, and it was the Status of the Artist Act. And we did that because we wanted to show those within the arts and culture community here in Nova Scotia that government were serious about this. And no matter what government came after us, and no matter what government continues to govern into the future, they have to respect the laws that are in place. They have to respect the acts that are in place from previous governments. And in Bill 1, Mr. Speaker, under Section 7, it says the government undertakes, so far as it considers reasonable and appropriate to, and under D, work with artists and artist association to guide and inform the government on matters relating to arts and culture. Mr. Speaker, I think that says enough that the change to the film tax credit does just that. It changes the environment for arts and culture here in our province. And under legislation, it says the government should consult with them. And that was the main thing I heard the other day, was that these decisions came about with no consultation with the industry. I know they've attempted to do that over the last few days, but they were forced to do that. Government was forced to do that. They weren't going to consult, Mr. Speaker. So we have a piece of legislation on the books from a number of years ago which states the government should consult when major changes to this sector happens, and that didn't happen. And I guess the Liberal government will have to answer for that. And you know, it's a shame, Mr. Speaker, that we're here today to see that. Our leader tried to indicate to the Premier today the impact. If $1 million investment was made in the province, how much that will be different now, the rebate that program will get, and it showed it across the country. So if $1 million was invested in a project here and across every province and territory, we're pretty much at the bottom. So out of that $1 million, that production may get up to $81,250. New Brunswick, Northwest Territory, PEI, Saskatchewan, they wouldn't get anything. But then it's us. At the top is Manitoba. And under that $1 million investment into the community or into that project, those productions will get about $300,000 back. So that just shows, and then the rest of the province are there. Quebec, they would get back about $280,000. Nunavut would get about $270,000. BC, $267,000. Quebec, $260,000. The Yukon would, people who do productions of the Yukon would get $250,000. And there's a number of them, and I won't go through them. And that's from Tom Fitzgerald, who knows that we have those numbers. And I hope that the government look at that and say, we need to rethink this. But I don't know, Mr. Speaker. I've seen the Premier, on media recently, and he's really talking tough with them, just like he talked tough with the unions in healthcare, Mr. Speaker. But there was some sunshine there. The government retreated. They came back and they actually introduced almost exactly what the unions had indicated they were going to do in the first place, Mr. Speaker. So I'm hoping that this will happen in this case, that the sun will shine, the government will realize that it's okay to come back and revisit this, and that would be our hope, Mr. Speaker, so that we can continue to see a thriving film and television industry, so we could continue to see an arts and culture community here in our province contribute so much to the economy here in Nova Scotia, Mr. Speaker. And I'll end on that, and I appreciate your time today.